Welcome to GLCast, the official podcast of GLProUK. GLProUK is a London-based creative studio. We work with a diverse range of companies, individuals and brands across multiple platforms to create a wraparound service for all your digital content creation requirements. This episode, we continue our How to Start a Podcast series, but I'm joined by Tony Gordon, Creative Director of GLProUK and Podcast Producer Extraordinaire. We're going to be discussing plugins, the best plugins for voiceover and podcast you should be using in your edit, and also the best place to buy plugins. Right, so once again, you're sat in front of your door of choice, you've got your episode up, you've done your edit, and now you're looking at it going, now what? Now what do I do? With so much editing technology available, it's hard to know where to start, especially when you want to start using plugins. So we've compiled a short list of plugins just to help make a little bit clearer the direction you need to go to make a crisper sounding podcast. Number one on this top 5 list is EQ, equalization.
That's true.
How would you sum up EQ?
An EQ, I mean,
It's hard.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, I could tell you the definition I have here, but I was just wondering
How I would put it is it's your baseline control for all sound in and out, which is why I would usually put it early in the chain.
Yeah.
Essentially, it gives you full control of the full spectrum of sound, bass, mid, high, to manually tweak.
manipulate the frequency.
There we go. He's reading it off the thing. What's your definition?
I wrote this blog, so so I was like manipulating the frequency. But it's hard to put in writing. You really have to look at it, play with it, and listen to it.
And I'll tell you what, the best thing to do is if you've got a bad piece of sound that either has a nasty bit of like deep hum or a really high-pitched noise in the background, that's the perfect time to learn what you can do with an EQ, because that's where you can use the EQ to cut out the whole bottom end underneath, below male speaking bass.
Yes, okay.
But there's a whole bit of the frequency that we don't need, and so you can get rid of. If you've got a bit of sound that has a problem like that, that's the best time to practice on an EQ.
And again, depending on the door, the name of the EQ usually gives away what it's going to do.
Yeah.
If it says make higher, get rid of soften background noises,
presets within the EQ. Yeah, exactly.
When you go to the presets in the EQ, it'll tell you what they do in the name.
You'll nearly always have a speaking voice or a voiceover one, which is obviously a lot of those presets are made for music. Mm-hmm. You want to stick to the
voice ones.
Not always, actually. That's not always true. But as a general rule, it's a good baseline, right?
Right, yeah. Okay, so number 2 on the plugin list is gate. Simplified, gates get rid of unwanted noise such as breathing or throat clearing by clamping down and closing when you aren't speaking.
Yeah, they're interesting. So the problem with a gate is in order to use it for breath properly or something like that, you need a consistent breath.
Right.
So if someone is inconsistent with how loud their breaths are or how deep they're drawing, you might get areas where it doesn't quite work right or it goes too far.
Okay.
And equally, like we've discussed before, if you have a lot of background noise, the gate's going to pull out that breath, and you're going to go from background noise to nothing to background noise.
Right. Of course. Yes.
So yes and no. I would say. I don't use a gate as such. I use noise plugins that have gates in them.
Right, okay.
But you have to use them tentatively, and yes, use it, but it might not, depending on your environment, it may or may not harm the sound.
Like the background noise of somebody banging very loudly right now.
Exactly. If I gated that out, you'd just hear...
Yeah, right, okay.
Right,
So, number 3, compressor.
Boom.
Now, compressors work to decrease your audio's dynamic range. But why? Well, that's what I said. But why
does the paper says?
But why does that matter? Why do you want your sound compressed?
So and compression is almost
really
more
hard.
Difficult than an EQ to put into words, because what you're doing is, as the word suggests, you're squeezing, compressing, making smaller, but you're also expanding it by doing so. You're reducing the range that is boosted to just the bit that you want to hear more of, like to a degree. And that's not in the same way as an EQ when we're talking about like high or low. We're talking more about things like attack and release, which is a thing, which essentially mean how quickly it comes into play or how slowly it comes out of play.
Right.
So
okay.
if you have a high attack, the compressor will come in quickly. If you have a high attack, the compressor will come in slowly. And you can notice the difference depending on how extreme what the compressor is doing. You might need to tweak that to get that right. To describe a compressor, you're making the sound louder without adding more gain.
There you go. That's it. Very well put. So it's very easy to be. I find it makes mine louder. It does it sorts out my volume issue. But you got to be careful not to just rely on that as just the make it louder tool. Because again, if it's not used properly,
a little bit here and there is great.
Yeah,
but you don't want to.
If it's not used properly, if you put on a compressor and then turn it right up as if you just with the volume, it's not going to work as well. As Tony mentioned, you heard him use the word attack. When you open up a compressor, certain doors, you'll see these knobs in there. And attack is one of them. And you're like, what does that do? Just play with it. See what it does.
The threshold is the most important one.
Yes.
The threshold essentially sets how loud the sound needs to be for the compressor to take action. So that is, regardless of what you're trying to do, that's the one that you're going to want to turn very slowly while you're listening to it to get the overall sound level right.
Yeah.
Don't just crank the gain in the compressor. That's not compression.
No, gain can be your friend, but it can also be your enemy.
Yes.
You have to know your gain. Right. Number 4, limiter.
Oh, it's my fave.
Now, limiter now is one of my favorites. At first, I was like, oh, I'm not playing with that. I don't know what it does. Once you know what it does, it can work wonders.
It's kind of compression.
Yeah.
But it's final. it's a way of putting most good compressors have a limiter in.
Well, a little note here, Audacity call their limiter a leveler.
Leveler, interesting. And that's interesting because different limiters do different things as well. If you have things like adaptive limiters and a lot of them have what you call a ceiling. Because what you're trying to do with a limiter is set a maximum volume. So, for instance, with a podcast, we might have a podcast that varies between, the overall sound varies between -12 and -3 decibels, like we discussed before.
Yep.
We want to level all that out at -6. So I'll set a limiter that starts the ceiling is -6. It can't go above that.
That's it.
And then with the other part of the compression side of the limiter, you can then bring what's left up, much like the threshold in the compressor, like we discussed. You kind of bring that down, but all of them are very different. You need an L1. You need an L1 like a hero till the end of the night.
Yeah, that's the limiter to use.
We'll get to that.
So limiter, I always used to think when I started using limiters.
Sorry. You hold on to an L1 till the end of the night. I got the lyric wrong. Can't be having that.
Hold on to it. A limiter, I always thought would be like that, the last thing you do. But obviously, in this list, it's number 4. So obviously, is it the last thing you do?
Yeah, for me,
yes.
It is. However, you might have a limiter on a track.
Yeah.
And then do something else on a bus.
Right.
And then have another limiter. And then do something else potentially on the master and have a limiter on there as well. So I'd say it's the last thing you do in any one channel, but that might not be the last thing you do.
Because I've had troubles with sound before, and I've been like, I'm going to have to ask Tony to come have a look. Tony, what am I doing wrong here? And you come over, and you look at it, and you're like, you can straight away see, they're in the wrong order. And I'm like, I don't even think it makes a difference what order I've got them lined up in the door in. But when you've got the limiter right up there, it's working against the compression down there, so you've got to reorder them.
Yeah.
And just by reordering the plugins, I'm like, oh my God, this sounds so much better.
It can do quite a lot different depending on where you do it. If you think about it logically, if you're bringing the sound up early and then reducing it again and then bringing it up again, you're taking out and then you're expanding, and then the second bit you've got less to it, but it's been pushed out, and then you're bringing it down again and then bringing it. The order can make a big difference, and really depending on what plugins you're using and what sound you're dealing with at the time. Sometimes I'll put the same plugins in different orders depending on what I'm trying to achieve.
Right, see how it works.
So there's no golden rule.
Yeah, okay.
Except you usually have an EQ at the start, you usually have a limiter at the end.
So in this list here, number 5 is normalize.
I guess.
And that's kind of like, you always need to normalize your audio as a final step. All it does is when the peak setting is selected, is maximize your volume based on the loudest point in your recording. So kind of what we were saying about the limiter, I guess.
what it really means is, and not all programs have normalized as a setting.
Right,
they might
okay.
call it something else. Often it's in the export settings, not as a plugin.
Yeah.
So I think Logic, for instance, I think has a normalize option, but it's a tick box in the when you're bouncing the track out. And it's exactly what you said there. It picks the highest point in the thing and makes everything that volume. It's a limiter. It is an automatic limiter. If you've done your sound correctly, you don't want to use a normalize because a normalize will then break what you've done.
Interesting.
If you are less than sure or you haven't had time to mix it properly, normalize will absolutely bring everything up to a consistent volume. But you should definitely listen to that afterwards because it might sound like crap.
Yeah. Make sure you've got it
it's
right.
It's an automated process. It doesn't know what it's hearing. That's the thing. Computers may be very clever, but they don't know what you're looking for.
Right, okay.
They don't know what you're trying to do, right?
So with all these plugins, with normalize maybe being questionable, these plugins here are kind of like little nuts and bolts to make a great voiceover and podcast audio. If you master them, you can get some good sound. Doesn't mean that's all you have to use, but you can, as a beginner, you get these plugins mastered, you'll be able to be putting out a good sounding podcast. Then moving forward, then you get to expand into, as we mentioned before, all these other plugins you can play with. But we keep mentioning plugins and saying what doors and what plugins are. We haven't really told you where you get them.
Yeah.
Because not all doors come with plugins. I mean, they do, but not you don't buy them through your door.
No.
So where are you getting these plugins from? Like, where do you get plugins from?
Great question.
Well, a variety of places, it turns out.
Yes.
So we've put together a little list of various places to get plugins for various doors. Now, this is a little list that I've just put together from talking to Tony and just doing research myself. You might have a different opinion on this, because I don't know if you just get your plugins from one set place.
No.
So
I buy them from all the 4 places you're about to say.
Okay, so the first one I've got is Waves.
Yeah, Waves.
Waves.com.
Waves is the Microsoft of the plugins industry, the Apple of the plugins industry.
Okay,
I guess,
high praise.
It's the leader. They are the leader in the plugin industry. They've been around a long time. They centralized a bunch of they bought up a bunch of licenses for plugins a long time ago. Even when I first started getting into music, Waves was already the guys. Like, if you wanted to be a music engineer, you need to have a Waves bundle. You need they're expensive as hell. Never buy anything from Waves if it's not on a deal.
Okay.
Because the price, their day-to-day sales price is just as a lie. Like,
so how much roughly are plugins? If you were to go to Waves and buy a plugin, you don't just go and buy one,
what
do
plugin you want to buy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, on deal, $29.
Okay, and that's for like one or bundle?
That'd be for one.
Okay.
But Waves, for instance, have a policy where it's like, I think 20% off the second one, 30% off the third one, 40% off the fourth one, and 50% and so on. And so if you actually wanted to buy a bunch and they're all on sale, these are stackable offers as well.
Right.
They realise that they are selling software and that there's no outgoing cost for them to sell it. They just want numbers.
Yeah.
But if you have to buy something when it's not on sale, you're like, why am I paying $200 for something I could get for $30?
Yeah.
You know? But in the sales, the bundles are the one.
Okay.
So I buy, and this is not for podcast production, but as a base for podcast production, it is good because it comes with So there's a restoration set. Waves sell a restoration pack that has their most of their noise plugins in it.
Right.
X Noise, X Crackle, Z Noise, X Click. I use X Crackle on every project I ever do.
Okay.
Before the EQ.
Wow,
X Crackle is one that I just put in because it removes that underlying level of crackle in anything. Even if it's a perfect piece of audio that has one little crackle halfway through where something it'll pull it out. It does, unless there's so much crackling it gets overworked, it's never detrimental.
Okay.
So it's the X Noise is really good at pulling out noise. Z Noise is similarly good. You have more control of high and low and where you can use it, but it's not as actually good at pulling out noise as X Noise. They are so that's the restoration pack with Waves.
Right.
But they come. I think the first Waves huge bundle that comes in is the Platinum bundle or Diamond. So Diamond bundle is like my baseline bundle that I would buy for a new editor that was coming to work for us, and that's like $2,000.
Wow.
Normally. Or on deal, $300.
Okay.
You see, so you need to buy that stuff when it's on deal.
Yeah, so it's
ridiculous.
It saves you money to know the bunch you want rather than just be like, I need this one.
They still don't have everything.
Right.
You need an NS1. If there's one, if there's 4 plugins you need from Waves.
Okay.
Right? X-Crackle.
Yep.
NS1. That's an automated noise suppression that basically is the best gate in the business. Automated gate.
Okay.
It's a 1-bar gate. You put it up, and it's a magnificent. Sometimes you put it on and just leave it at 0, and it just pulls out a little. It's brilliant. For me, Vocal Rider.
Right. Yeah.
Because if you are dealing with very quiet stuff, sometimes compression isn't enough, and you need something that follows the vocal. And what a vocal rider does is essentially will follow the vocal, and if it's under a certain amount, it'll push it up by however much you tell it to, but you can set a threshold so that it won't go over a certain amount.
Right.
Or you can use it to do the opposite and pulse. If someone's really loud and the other person's really quiet, you can use it to kind of temper them a little bit. I use that all the time. It's the one for me. It doesn't remove any noise. It doesn't do anything other than
it just
adjust
keeps
volume.
consistent.
And you need to play with it a lot before you figure out how to use it, because it's quite complex, but it's also just the one.
So what was your 4th one?
The L1 limiter.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, there's no better limiter on the market.
No, there's not.
It's simple. It does what it's meant to do. And a lot of other limiters out there try and be too clever, and they do shit. And you're like, I set a ceiling of 6, and I told it to do nothing else, and for some reason it's coming out of 3. There's a whole stereo mono problem there. We'll get into
if I've uploaded a new DAW, I've opened a new Logic, or it's upgraded. So if anything's changed plugin wise, and I'm near the end of doing my edit, and I go to my limiter, and it's not the limiter I want, it's not the L1. I'm just like, why is there all these options? What is this? And it's not. This isn't right. It's not. It really throws me. Like,
for instance, in Logic, if I didn't have any plugins, I'd use the compressor as a limiter over using the Logic limiter.
Right, interesting.
And I just turn the limiter on the compressor and turn everything else off. Right?
So what's interesting, those 4 like must-haves you just mentioned there, the functions, well, for you, for if you're doing this as a professional editor, say,
yeah.
the function they have basically simplifies a task you can complete that you would use multiple plugins to do without that one. Is that yes? So if you were trying to get the result of like the vocal rider, that's potentially something that will take multiple plugins to get right, but you can just do it in one.
Yeah, I guess so. You could use a compressor and a limiter and some sort. You could achieve the same thing with a combination of compressors and limiters, but the vocal rider is designed to do what it does. I mean, it's designed for music, really, for pushing vocals above the sound. Like if you need to just keep the vocal above, but it works very well on the spoken word.
I'm not sure if I mentioned already, but obviously all these sites that sell plugins are usually compatible with all DAWs. Mostly. They come in a few different forms. You've got VST, VST3, AU, and they're essentially different formats of plugin. Right. Most of these plugins will come in all of those formats, and most DAWs will accept all of those formats. Okay. Chances are, if your DAW doesn't accept all those formats, it'll accept one of them. Okay. But do check beforehand.
So,
how do you say this one?
Isotope. Okay, so Waves, we're talking about, we're just they're the guys that you go to for broad everything plugins.
Right.
These next 2 or 3 are more for noise, for these, and this is where I go for podcast specific help.
Right.
Isotope have a noise bundle, and denoise bundle, I think it is. So Isotope, I don't use theirs very much anymore, but they do have an excellent click removal,
right?
Click and crackle removal, which can be a bit more detrimental to the X crackle. Like it can hurt the sound if you overblow it, but it can also be very useful if you're tracking something like that. They also have a very good what's it called? Dialogue denoiser.
Right.
So, and what that does is it gives you sort of an EQ that you can set, like a visual EQ that you can set, like a graphic EQ that you can set the denoise on a bit. It's not as good as it could be, but because you can focus on high, or because you have more space to focus on the area you want to, never leave that on automatic. It won't sound very good. You have to set it manually. Isotope also have a bunch of other plugins that are pretty good in that, but they're the ones that really help, I think, with podcasts.
Okay, so let's use them. Okay, and acquisitions. What's this one?
Acoustinos.
I was way off.
Okay.
Acoustinos.
So where Isotope I wouldn't say are essential. I think because they're quite expensive for what you get. Right. Acoustinos, I would say now for a new editor, 100% essential, because they are one knob denoise plugins that are cheap.
Oh, excellent.
They do a deverb, which pulls reverb out of the room, it only does as much as it can. You can't pull reverb out of a room. But if you've ever used a deverb plugin, theirs is one of the better ones. They also have a denoise plugin. It's not as good as the NS1, but it's not the same as the NS1 either. I use both of them nearly every time.
Okay.
Because they pull out different types of noise, and together they do the job.
Right.
The NS1 and the ERAN, which is Akusonos' noise plugin. They're for me, that's like the ultimate noise reduction combination.
Wow, okay.
Considering
Ultimate
they're both
noise.
one bar, considering you've got a knob and
I like one bars.
each of them has one thing to do.
Yeah.
You're doing a lot of fixing for one bar, for one knob.
Yeah,
you know,
I like plugins that have one bar and one knob on them.
Akusonos have also recently released a Desplosive plugin, which essentially is if something's peaking, it pulls out the
Oh, you showed me this one, yes.
I'm not sure that it works that well. I've been testing it and I can't.
Okay.
But I'm sure it does something. But when you're peaking, you're peaking.
Yeah.
There's nothing you're going to do about that without cutting it.
Okay.
And then the other one they have now is a de-esser. They have their own de-esser.
Oh, do they? Okay.
It's not as good as Waves de-esser though.
Right.
I'd stick. Oh, that's the other one I didn't mention in Waves. That's probably an essential is the de-esser because everyone says S all the time, and it's a noise that if over compressed or compressed too much, as soon as you start bringing that up,
a lot more noticeable.
You'll hear it, and you'll need to pull it out. But
Yeah.
de-esser will just pull the S out or the shush out. Sometimes you might want to put two de-essers on, one for the S and one for the sh. See presets for more details.
Plugin Alliance.
Plugin Alliance
last one I have on here.
are a bit more like Waves. They buy up large scale. They buy up licenses for plugins, often the same sort of plugin that Waves might sell, but cheaper.
Okay.
Like a rip-off of the same plugin, or not a rip-off, but a different version of the same plugin. They have a quite good deverb plugin that I would say is up there with the other one from Akusonos.
Right.
They also have a pretty decent limiter and loads of other, if you're into music and rack panels, they do loads of rack panel, because a lot of plugins are used to emulate an old sound, like I want it to sound like it's being recorded on a Neve desk, that kind of thing. But they do a lot of plugins like that. So, and they're quite cheap compared to Waves. After Waves are very expensive, so only buy on deals. The other three all have deals as well, but actually the baseline price isn't as bad as Waves.
And it's fairly simple when you bought your Waves to get them into your door. Like I've seen how you do it. You just
Now it is,
yeah.
As long as you're not running a hooky copy of your door, it's very easy. If you are running a hooky copy of your door, you're never going to get past 9.6. 9.6. Go back to. I'm not saying you should ever steal anything, but you're never going to be able to install anything after 9.6.
Right. Okay. So, listen, this all might sound a bit, considering we started this How to Start a Podcast series with just really small little steps, and now all of a sudden we're throwing all these terms and letters and numbers at you, and
it's just an NS1 and the RAN, man. Whatever.
Don't get freaked out. These are all things that you will build up towards if you stick at it. We've already told you the basics of what you need. Most of what you need basic-wise you already have in your door. But it's just moving forward, you're going to want to get, as Tony mentioned, his main ones, the de-esser and what have you, and your L1 limiter. There are certain ones that would just make everything a bit better without having to go as deep as we've just been going. But eventually, you can get there if you need to. And then you can be almost untouchable. Not untouchable, I'm not going to say you're untouchable with bad sound, but you'll be pretty damn close.
Yeah. One last thing from Waves. I just bought essentially a set of plugins that had most of what we'd need in it.
Right.
And it was a set. It was a way of doing it that I hadn't done before. That had a lot of all the same things we were just saying with Diamond and the Restoration Pack. It was the video edit suite and the broadcast and production suite. They're both quite small bundles that, when reduced, come down to like $100 kind of area. Together, that has a lot of what you need in it if you get both of them. I actually just installed those on your computer.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, I'm going to wrap up a little mantra I came across online when it came to plugins, and it was simply expand your mind, expand your abilities, expand your knowledge, expand your plugins. Thanks for listening to GLCast. Be sure to follow at GLProUK on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and find us on our LinkedIn page. Thank you.